amazing Australians and the story of their lives. You're tuned to Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald.
Hello, listeners. Once more, it's such a pleasure to be with you again and to introduce you to my guest today, the lovely Geni Papacostas. Geni was born just outside Thessaloniki in Greece. Her earliest memories of childhood revolve around food and the love of people and sharing their table. For Geni, food has always been a link to the spirituality of Greece and a bringing together of friends and family. She says every dish she serves evokes nostalgia and memories. In 2009, Geni was in the top 10 of Australia's MasterChef, and she has run two very successful restaurants, Chantilly and Inchcomb's Bistro in Queensland. She has contributed her ideas and recipes to a number of great causes, and we, that being Rob and I, my husband and I, were lucky enough to have Geni provide many of the recipes for our photographic coffee table book, 101 Greek Islands, a sailing and dining odyssey. Geni is known in Brisbane as the woman who does the Greek cooking in town. And I must admit, I have been lucky enough to taste a number of Geni's magnificent recipes. So welcome, Geni.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
It is a pleasure. So now, first of all, Geni is short for Eugenie. Do you ever go by that name? Or?
I was called Geni. It was easier when I first came to Melbourne, and I started at year 9. But when my mother called me one day Jennifer, I thought my name is Geni with a G. And so definitely not Eugenia. Eugenia is a name that means politeness, being kind.
Lovely. Does that mean the same for Eugene? Because amazingly, my brother's Eugene and
noble,
Geni and Eugene are friends.
Right. Yeah. Noble, very noble background.
Yeah, exactly.
And the Greeks celebrate name days instead of birthdays. You take after the saint. You celebrate birthdays when you're very young, but as you grow older, you only celebrate your name day. And everyone actually forgets mine being Christmas Eve.
Oh, what a day to
very unfortunate.
Have a birthday. As I said, you were born just outside the wonderful Greek city of Thessaloniki. So when did you come to Australia? You said to Melbourne, didn't you?
Yes, I've lived in Melbourne all my life. I came at 1965, and instead of finishing primary school, I was quite tall for my age, so I started at year 9.
Right.
And I was the only Greek, actually, at the school, which helped me a lot to pick up the language because I was learning American, not English, while I was in Greece.
Right.
So I was very lucky to do that. But I never went back to Greece till about 1981.
And when did you come to Brisbane?
And in Brisbane, I moved in 1993. Right. So I'm a Brisbaneite now, actually.
Well and truly. Now, you said remember watching back in Greece, we are now, you remember watching your grandmother when you visited the village and realised that cooking was an act of love. You
Definitely.
said whatever was created was out of poverty, and yet everyone ate like a king.
Well, everyone definitely, going back to the village, which is about 1 hour outside Thessaloniki, famous for potatoes, beautiful waters. I remember watching my grandmother bake the main meal on a Sunday on the outdoor oven, and all the neighbours will come in. They would have not a lot of food, but no one thought they were poor. Yes. It was cucina povera, which means out of poverty, but they will produce amazing meals from nothing, from whatever they had. They ate meat only once a month, if that. But it was the sharing, the communication, the love, and also they would prepare a lot of food during the summer months. I remember every time I went to the village, we made a type of a noodle which is called trachana, sour milk and a lot of eggs. And my duty was to watch out that no chickens went on this spread pastry dough on sheets, and I had to be there for a long time till they dried out. So they would preserve that and use that for soups in winter. But at least once a week, they will be doing meze, which is a way of eating in Greece, sharing plates, and that would be out of nothing. And I used to think, why does my grandmother spend so much time cooking? And she would say, you will learn one day.
Oh,
It's sharing the love, cooking from the heart, and creating memories, bringing the family together. Even when we moved to Melbourne, Sunday was a day of everyone getting together, the family meal, coffee. Sunday family day will start at 11. It won't finish before 5 o'clock
oh, really?
in the afternoon.
And all part of it all is the preparation.
Preparation
and
and
the sitting.
sharing. It's mainly, you never eat a meal alone. And you always save the best for the guests.
Right.
So that's what you learn about what we call philoxenia. It's a Greek word. It means a guest and a stranger. You enter as a stranger, but you leave the house as a friend.
Oh,
And that's part of Greek philotimo, which means it's not all about you. It's all about sharing and giving to others.
oh, isn't that lovely? And it's so true. Absolutely. So, Geni, now tell us, how did you end up on MasterChef?
Okay, I have my
I know
daughter.
we're moving forward a few
I know,
years,
but
we'll go
my
back.
daughter to blame for that. Apparently, she kept asking me one day. She moved here from Melbourne. I had never heard of MasterChef or the chef, the English program, and she kept asking me questions. What do you like cooking, Mum, etc., etc. While we're supposed to be packing to go away. Anyway, I came back from this Eden Health Farm with my daughter, and I got a phone call. And they asked me if I would like to go and present for MasterChef. I thought they were trying to sell me saucepans.
Oh,
And that's how I ended up on the show. And I thought, no, I don't really want to go on it.
yes.
So when I'm on stage in the top 20 in Sydney, I turned around while I'm walking off the set and I said to George, by the way, George, I have a daughter, a blonde version of me, and she is single.
Oh,
That was sort of a payback time. But I loved food, and MasterChef was an experience. I loved it because you breathe and live food. And
exactly.
long before that, food
must have
has
been
been a passion. But it was, yes,
Terrifying?
terrifying, but you're so absorbed in what you do and you lose reality,
Right.
but you learn so much.
Yes. And, of course, it's not necessarily the best chef that wins at the end either,
Not
is it?
really. I mean,
Probably
things
like
have
everything but
changed
politics.
since I went now.
Yes.
Since have changed a lot, but it's an amazing experience.
I imagine it would.
that
But
would
at one
repeat.
stage, when you came back to Brisbane, whatever, there, you lectured hospitality science at the Brisbane North Institute of TAFE.
Yes,
and
I
taught cultural food studies at Albany
yes,
Creek as
Albany
well.
Creek High School. I taught there amongst a few things, even Japanese
Oh.
for a couple of years, and maths. Yeah, I loved food from human development in Melbourne and textiles and economics. I moved on to hospitality when I came to Brisbane. It was something in my blood, and at one stage of my life, I think I was telling Rosemary earlier that I felt like Loxandra, which is a Greek girl in a book that Victoria Hislop has written, that she lives in Constantinople and she wakes up every morning and her first thoughts were, well, what am I going to cook today?
Oh.
And that actually relates to me, and that's how you feel, especially if you spend any time in Greece and you walk in the morning and you see all the beautiful produce, the markets, and food is the only thing that I talked about for years and years.
But how
as
lovely.
if I didn't know anything else.
And to wake up in the morning, you've got an aim, haven't you? Because so many people wake up and not quite sure what they're going to do during the day.
Yeah.
So now, Geni, tell me the origins of Greek food and Greek cooking. It didn't start necessarily in Greece, did it?
Well, it has started in Greece, but it had a lot and it spread around the world.
Okay.
We go back, as George Columbaris, if I may quote him from MasterChef, used to say, Greeks invented everything.
Yes, so true.
And it goes back 2,700 approximately BC. The Minoans brought a lot of the grains and nuts in Greece, and that was the beginning of the foundation of bread and the beginning of cooking. Even those early stages from what has been found on ceramic pots, not only the wine that they used to drink, they found that they were using a lot of sage and oregano, even so early. They were using a lot of fish, so it goes back to those times. Then we had a lot of changes when the Romans came and took over about 146 BC. And then we progressed through time to the Byzantine years. And you see a little bit of change in cuisine then because Unfortunately, the Ottoman Empire took over Greece for 400 years.
Of course.
And that's when you have the influences of a lot of spices. Just prior to that, Greeks were importing a lot of pepper and cinnamon.
Oh, okay.
But during the Turkish occupation, and a lot of the names are still like bouillardi. It's still a dish made like a meat stew flavored with pureed eggplant using milk and butter.
Right.
And that still exists in south of Greece in the Peloponnese.
Oh, okay.
Where there's a lot of Turkish influence. And that went on, and we married a lot of the dishes from those times, like moussaka, which is definitely Greek.
Right.
But
moussaka. Yes.
Moussaka, but it has the Turkish influence like dolma. We call it dolmades. Dolma meaning stuff, and it's a Syrian, Middle Eastern plus Greek. But we changed that we use a lot of more herbs in the Greek cuisine. And I find the Greek flavors, and people will object to this, but they marry better. It's just a slower cooking method of food and the freshness of the food that you get in nearly all of the Mediterranean. But after that occupation, I found that the Venetians came about the 15th century because Greece became a Greek state about the revolution started in 1821, and by 1830, half of the south of Greece was Greek, the center of Greece, Peloponnese, and half of the Aegean Islands. Then the Venetians came, and they left another influence. And you see a lot of the Ionian Islands and the islands on the Aegean closer to the mainland, plus Crete, have a lot of Venetian influence. For example, Corfu, when you get married as a young girl, you get the family jewels, the jewelry, but it's not jewelry at all. It's a little velvet sack with the 5 spices.
Oh, really?
Like cinnamon, cardamom, cloves, nutmeg, pepper, and paprika. And that's got the Italian influence. And a lot of the cooking, for example, in Corfu, which is not just from Venetian era, is they use a bit of the Baltic from the Balkans as well. When they did in Venice, they use the red meat being horse, and they cooked it with wine. And then the Greeks changed it and made it Corfu, and it is from Corfu by using a lot of the spices. And you see all that influence right through, like the most evident change or influence would be the cured meats. They call it lunsa, which even up in Cyprus, like the cured pork. They used to do that in the villages when you used to cure meat to have in winter, but it was a different method of preservation. It wasn't as smoked as they did. And you get the nut cake, which is made out of walnuts or almonds, as far as Kythera, because Brisbane eats a lot from Kythera.
Yes.
And
are they? I didn't realise
I
that,
didn't even know Kythera existed before I moved to Brisbane from Melbourne. And then you've got other influences in the Aegean Sea as well, apart from the cakes, the way they're cooking and preserving the food, especially cured meat.
It's extraordinary. Talking of Clitheroe, I didn't realise until we were actually doing our book, 101 Greek Islands, which, as I say, Geni very kindly did the recipes for us. But Clitheroe, of course, had the anti-Clitheroe machine, which,
of course,
if you look that up, is probably the first computer ever in the world, which was hundreds of years ago. Now, tell me, is it true that you sort of own up to owning just about every edition of Gourmet Traveller, and that you've travelled the world several times for the sole purpose of culinary inspiration?
I love travelling, and I've been able to do that since about 81, and especially 93, when my children were off my hands, like finishing high school at the end of that year, beginning of 2000. And I hope Peter is not listening, I do own...
Peter is Jenny's husband, who we listened to, I might say, a few weeks ago at the Amanda Flynn Foundation.
Peter will not be upset, but he doesn't like hoarding, but I do have all my Gourmet Travellers.
Oh, really?
And I have travelled, to answer your other question, I was in the island of Syros, which is a beautiful island, used to be a capital of Greece for a very short time in the Aegean, very close to Athens, an amazing island from Catholic and Orthodox religion, both influences. But I got on a boat to go to Tinos because we had to go and try this amazing thalassaki little restaurant that served only grilled zucchini and zucchini blossoms.
Oh, I love them. I do love them.
So I have done that, yes. And usually the most Greek food saying that is simple but not simplistic. So it sounds like a very simple food, but it is. It's just the flavors. It's how it's presented, how it is cooked.
And, not just the love of how it's cooked, but also the love of how it's grown. Because in so many of the places that we went to on our boat when we were lucky enough to be in the Med for 8 or 9 years, it was that you'd pull up to a lovely little taverna and mother or grandmother was out in the back garden and she was producing the produce for the restaurant.
Yes.
And quite often it was their own wine and their
definitely.
food, and all produced with such love. Now, you've been known to pull apart just about everything that you've eaten in beautiful restaurants around the world. Well, not quite pull it apart, but then you want to recreate it at home. So are chefs reasonably happy to share some of their...
many times I just ask for a second and third helping,
Okay.
trying to work out. And I have to tell you a funny story. We went to LA about 4 years ago, and Peter had the flu, so Peter was in bed, so I was with my daughter. And we were recommended to go to this particular restaurant for the mushroom pasta.
Oh.
Well, it's quite very, very rich and a beautiful pasta. But after the third serving, my daughter kept saying, you've got to write the recipe, And finally, we're on the way home back, jump on a Virgin aeroplane, and I opened the magazine, and here is the recipe for the mushroom pasta.
Oh.
I did have a very close recipe that I did on my own, but yes. A lot of times chefs will give you ideas, but
they don't
I
want to
just
give
love
their secret ingredient. Yes, exactly.
But it's quite interesting when you start talking and you show them that you do understand food, that they will share.
And you also love cooking Asian food as
I love
as well.
Asian.
And
I love
different spices.
Definitely. I find it's sort of all West. It's East meets West. It's all intertwined together. I think a lot of the Greek cuisine has changed now, especially in Athens.
Yes.
There's a lot of contemporary chefs. And if we go back a little bit, late 19th century, the first ever cookbook on Greek cuisine was written by Nick Chelemendes. And Chelemendes means a recipe book now. He's the one that brought bechamel sauce from France, because the area of France along the coast, it was all Greece many, many years ago after Alexander the Great, Versailles, all that area. So I find that a lot of the recipes have used all the influences over the years, so there could be a little bit of French.
Yes.
And that happened in 19th century when they wanted to refine food.
Yes.
And that's what Chelemendes Nick had done. And that's why you have the Greek pasticcio, which is your lasagna in Italian.
Yeah.
We finish it off with the bechamel sauce and the moussaka. That's all evolved.
My mouth is
But yes,
watering.
I love Thai food, but nothing beats when you're in Greece. And I believe that you eat just Greek food if you are in Greece. And the more simple the food, the better. And what you do, not in the middle of Athens, but if you are in Corfu, we've done that, you go inside the restaurant, inside the kitchen in a restaurant.
Yes.
And they'll show you what they have. You check out what there is, if there is a microwave or they cook in the old-fashioned way.
Right.
And a lot of times it's a big outdoor oven like they do
Yes.
in Patmos. And you can see them carrying the food from the farm, preparing and then carrying it in the back oven, which is an outdoor oven, fired with wood, etc.
Oh, how lovely. We'll come back actually to the woods, but you are listening to Lots to Chat About. I'm Rosemary Peterswald, and my guest today is Geni Papacostas. In Greece, you know, most of the islands are known for their own special dishes. We've talked about Corfu, and now we're going to go to the island of Savota, where in our book, which you very kindly did for us, you did a wonderful recipe for stuffed aubergine. And I suppose there's a number of ways that one can cook that, because it's something that everybody can get hold of, isn't it?
And it's funny, after a lot of the years, I've learned doing the stuffed aubergine, my grandmother being from Smyrna. What I wanted to say before, one of the influences, and I can mention it now, when the Greeks devastating, the military lost the war in 1923, Izmir, now Smyrna, and the Levantines, which was Greeks, a few English, a lot of people from the Middle East and Italians left. They all, about 1 million people, refugees, went to Greece. And at the same time, they left, the bourgeoisies left, the middle class left the Constantinople. And they brought the spices like cumin back to Greece. And the stuffed eggplant at that time got the influence of what it is today. A lot of meat, spices, and tomato. But many variations have happened since. I used to go to the trouble of scooping out the flesh and then you chop it up and fry it. Now
That's what I do, yes.
Well, now you don't have to do that. You cut it in half, you score it, you bake it in the oven, and whether it is a mincemeat filling or chopped tomatoes, onion, basil and garlic, then that's piled on top with sliced tomato and a bit of yogurt.
Oh.
And then you have your nutmeg and you have your oregano. And talking about oregano, it's the only time that we'll use dried oregano. And oregano means the flower of the mountain. And you use it towards the end. Oregano instead of fresh oregano will be the only herb that I would use fresh. So
what a wonderful hint, because
Yes.
I must admit, that's Rob's favourite recipe. But we've been scooping it out and doing it
Yes.
probably the hard way. But,
and sometimes they use bechamel as the topping as well.
Right.
So that's one of the main dishes that you would do.
And on the island of Almost Viho, am I saying that right? Viho? V-I-H-O?
Viho, yes.
Viho, you describe a crayfish paella. Now, paella is another dish that I think we all know here in Australia.
Yes, it's sort of Spanish, but
Spanish
again,
or Greek. Yes.
Spanish or Greece. And it's funny how over the years now they're evolved and they're using instead of the rice, because we produce the saffron. Paella is famous for the saffron.
Yes.
North of Greece, Kozani, which is where I come from, that's where we produce saffron as well. Because people will argue that paella is not Greek. But it was a Greek colony along the coast, Spain, Portugal, France, right up to all the coast, Croatian coast, right down. But that is after Alexander the Great. But they use the same method as the Spaniards, cooking or sautéing a sofrito, the base of the onion, garlic, the spices that you use, which is mainly saffron, sometimes capsicum. But a lot of the Greeks now, they change that. You do your onion, your garlic, but then you add your saffron, you add risoni, and it's 1 cup of risoni, 2 cups of stock, fish or chicken stock. Then you add your seafood and it all cooks in the oven, a more simple method. But that's how the recipes now have evolved to be lighter, not as heavy.
Well, I'm sure our listeners can work out for themselves that Geni's just not an expert on cooking and producing yummy meals, but she's also a terrific history expert on Greece as well, which we can all learn a little bit from. But now we're going back to the many, many ways that you can cook one of the favourite meats in Greece, and that's goat.
Goat, yes.
Because we certainly tasted it many, many times, and I must admit that at one stage in my life we actually bred goats. And we bred them for their wool, but sadly the male goats weren't of any good for breeding, so they had to end up in the pot.
Definitely.
So tell us about the lovely one.
Actually, I've grown up as a pet with a goat, and when I saw it on the dinner table one Easter, it's a traditional meat, I could not eat it. But I have started eating goat many years later after that. But there are different ways, depending which part of Greece you come from. Like goat in the Peloponnese, it's always slowly cooked as the islands with red wine. And long time ago, it refers back to the Venetian times when they used horse meat in Venice, cooked in wine. And the Greeks added a lot of cinnamon sticks, a lot of spices.
Yes.
But it's the slow method of cooking. In a lot of the islands in the Peloponnese, they will use a lot of prunes, like they use a lot of dried fruit. Right. Northern Greece doesn't use a lot of nuts and raisins, even in the dolma, but with the goat, they use, it's a sweetening ingredient like they do in France, with the duck, for example.
Oh, of course, yes.
But the slow-cooked method, but the most traditional method, if you went to a village during Easter, it'll be the goat on a spit.
Oh, right.
And it's very healthy. They use a lot of goat meat on Ikaria, the blue zone area in Greece.
Oh, okay.
You can't buy anything but goat feta there, and you can't buy anything but goat milk ice cream.
Gosh.
And they live over 100. This is the island where people
I've read about
to die.
That. Yes. People live forever.
Forever. And if you ever have a chance, if I may say, you should visit the Panegyri, which is festivals in Greece. And the most famous one are in Ikaria, top of the mountains.
Oh,
it's an amazing place. The feasts, the celebrations, and you get the meat, the goat, or the lamb cooked, and you get it served, or the pork actually as well, served on a piece of paper.
And what about now going back to the sea? There's so many ways you can cook octopus.
My favourite.
And it's one of our favourites too. And but we have only seemed to sort of learn in the last year or so how to perfect it by cooking it for a long, long time. But I'm sure you will come up with an easier way for me to do this.
It's a lot of practice, and I first started cooking goat again when I went in 2006 to. Octopus. Yeah. We moved to octopus now. I found out that the best way to cook that is, as I was taught by Athenians, you wash it and you put it in a pot I love using aromatics like bay leaves that take that smell away, especially if you're in a confined small kitchen, a cinnamon stick, star anise, and you can have a base of all chunks of carrot or celery instead of throwing them out as a base. No water, a little bit of vinegar, and you cover it with a slow cooked, cover it with a lid till it falls off the fork. And then you let it cool, you take the skin off, and you can either preserve it, cut it up, and keep it in lemon or oil, or keep it in a container and put a bit of lemon or oil or chuck grilled before you're about to eat it. Other people bake it, roasted in the oven for an hour, the same aromatics covered in foil. But in a lot of the islands, they cook it like with onion and garlic, saute it, and then they break it down by adding red wine and onion and cook it very slowly. And to make it last longer, they used to add little pasta with it.
Oh, right.
Small piece of macaroni, cut up macaroni.
Oh, lovely.
But we all prefer octopus being chuck grilled or boiled slowly. Then you throw it on the coal and serve it on a bed of fava beans, which is a beautiful Greek fava split piece from Santorini. And that's the more refined way. People in Greece, a lot of chefs experimenting, finding different ways of serving food. Yes. Fava used to be eaten during Lent, so it's just boiling the split peas, yellow, green beans for a long time, and then flavouring with pan-fried onion, lemon and oil. But now they do that as a base, like pureed form, as a base for the octopus.
Oh, look, I'm sure everybody like my mouth is absolutely watering. We are running out of time, and I was going to ask you, but we'll have to have you back, as to the Saganaki dish, which every island seems to have their own way of doing that. But I'll have to leave that till next time, because I wanted to just ask you very quickly, you're very involved in the Greek community here in Brisbane. Can you tell us a bit more about how you celebrate sort of certain Greek specials and when the ouzo comes out and all of that?
Well, every time you go to a Greek house, I remember as a little girl, you have a shot of ouzo or raki.
Right.
And depending where you come from, Northern Greece, we call it tsipuro, which is like grappa, 99.95 alcohol if your grandfather makes it in the backyard. Or if you're in Crete, and I've experienced that in the island in Crete recently, you'll be offered a shot of raki. Right. If at beginning as hospitality or at the end of the meal complimentary. Yeah. But I had to read you quickly the 10 commandments of raki. The first shot brings you an appetite. The second shot is for good health. The third for joy. The fourth for happiness. 5 is for excitement. By the 6th, you start to chatter a lot. By the 7th, it's a Greek fight. Greeks are very noisy and loud. But the 8th is the police arrive. On the 9th, you go to the judge. And by the 10th, we visit you at your funeral.
Oh, how absolutely wonderful. Oh, Geni, I could go on talking to you forever. Geni Papacostas, may I just say how wonderful it has been having you here, for spending so much time with us and sharing with us all your wonderful ideas and your hints on cooking. And as I said, we've got to have you back sometime. And I'm sure the staff here are hoping that they can produce a Bunsen burner or something and we can have you cook something up for us.
I will cook on site. Definitely, I would love to.
Thank you, Geni.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul, for producing.
Thank you. Great friends and great chats. That was another Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald. Stay tuned next week for another amazing chat.